Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. We're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. Bienvenue à l'Hôtel de Ville. Et bienvenue à notre petit déjeuner annuel de la Journée internationale des femmes. Welcome to our annual International Women's Day breakfast at City Hall. Great to see you all this morning. It's really great to look around the room and see so many terrific women in leadership roles in our community who are here today. Really amazing. Fantastic. And I want to take a second to acknowledge the presence of many of our members of Ottawa City Council who are here today. So Glenn Gower is here, Catherine Kitts, Lane Johnson, Ralston King, David Brown, Kathy Curry, David Hill, Laura Dudas, Marty Carr, Theresa Kavanaugh. I'm going to get to Jessica in a second. Riley Brockington, and I'm saving Jeff Leeper and Jessica Bradley for last because I want to say a couple things. First of all, Jeff Leeper's here. It's his birthday tomorrow. Happy birthday, Jeff. And I wanted to recognize Councillor Bradley because she held her International Women's Day breakfast event yesterday, as did Councillor Curry. And I went to Councillor Bradley's event yesterday, and it was fantastic. And so I'm glad that she's here with us today. But she pointed out to me that this breakfast event starts much earlier than hers did. So she's got a cup of coffee in her hand, so that's good. That'll help get her going. I also wanted to acknowledge the presence of many members of the diplomatic community in Ottawa. One of the best things about our city is that we are the home of so many international missions, and so there are many ambassadors and high commissioners and other representatives of the diplomatic community who are here today, and one of my favorite parts of this job is getting to meet all of those people, so thank you for being here this morning. In addition, there are many other elected officials in the room today, including school board trustees, for both the French and English school boards in our city. And also somewhere here is John Fraser, who was just re-elected as the MPP for Ottawa South. Congratulations, John. Thank you for being here today. And again, it is just so wonderful to look around the room and see so many great leaders in our community, many of whom are women, and we're going to hear from one of those. We'll have the pleasure of hearing from one of these highly accomplished women, Dr. Vera Etches, in just a moment. But before we go any further, and as we gather on this sacred land, I would like to acknowledge with deep respect and gratitude that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. Today we acknowledge and honor all First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples, and we commit ourselves to the journey of reconciliation, healing, and unity. Je souhaite également la bienvenue à mes collègues du Conseil et à leurs invités. Welcome to my council colleagues and their invited guests. And I wanted to say a welcome to members of our senior leadership team who are here. I think most of them are sitting in the front row. And by the way, I didn't mention Ariel Troster when I was mentioning all the councillors, but that's because she's going to come up and speak in a minute. So she'll get a proper introduction. But I'm grateful to all the members of our senior leadership team who are here today, including Wendy Stephenson, our city manager, the first woman to hold that job in the history of our city. It's great to see you, Wendy. And I want to tell you, I am so grateful to have been surrounded by many impressive and inspiring women in my family throughout my life. Boys and men were kind of a rarity in my family. On both my mother's side and my father's side, it was mostly daughters and not very many sons. So I was always surrounded by aunts and my mom and my sister. My grandmother, who was born in Paris in 1905 and lived to be 104. My wife, Ginny, is with us this morning. Hi, Ginny. And of course, our daughters, Erica and Kate. Et je suis fier d'avoir travaillé avec tant de femmes qui ont réussi tout au long de ma carrière. I'm proud to have worked with many successful women throughout my career in business and as a coach and mentor to some entrepreneurs, some of whom are in the room today. And again, here now at the city with a great senior leadership team that has many women, including Wendy. This year's theme for International Women's Day is Accelerate Action. According to the World Economic Forum, if we keep doing things the way we're doing them now, if we stick to the status quo, the way things have always been done, in order to reach full gender parity, it will take until the year 2158. And I'm not prepared to wait that long myself. That's roughly 5 generations or 133 years from now. That's way too long. So we do need to accelerate action. We need equality now. Il nous faut maintenant l'égalité. And when I think about that statistic, I can't help but think about what that means for my own children, especially my youngest daughter, Kate, who is 13. And I know a few of you have met her. She is a very determined young woman. Right now, she's getting ready to go to a gymnastics competition in Montreal this weekend. And as her father, I've thought about this since the day she was born. I don't want anything ever to discourage her, to shake her confidence, to give her a sense that for some reason she can't achieve everything she wants to achieve. She can't achieve all the things that her older brother could achieve. And yet the reality is, as all of you know, as some of you have experienced yourselves, Kate and so many other girls and women will face unfair obstacles as they strive for success, however they choose to define success. There are systemic barriers, there are biases, unconscious and conscious, that prevent women from realizing their fullest potential. Je crois que toutes les femmes se souviennent immédiatement d'un moment où elles ont été confrontées à des difficultés en raison de leur genre. I'm sure every woman can immediately recall a time when they faced hardship or obstacles based on their gender. It's not right. It's not fair. It must change. And so my hope is that today and every day, we remind ourselves of that ongoing struggle. We commit ourselves to accelerate action, to speeding up the momentum towards gender equality, true gender equality. Nous nous engageons à véritablement accélérer le mouvement vers l'égalité des genres. And we celebrate women who stand out, who are so inspiring to us, who are role models for all of us. As I mentioned before, we do have the honor of hearing from one such inspiring person this morning, Dr. Vera Etches. I will be introducing her in a moment. But first, I would like to welcome my co-host this morning, Ariel Troster, City Councillor and Council Liaison for Women, Gender Equity, and 2S LGBTQ+ Affairs, who is going to join us and give a few remarks. Ariel?
Good morning, everyone. It is so wonderful to be in a room today with so many powerful women and gender diverse people, dignitaries, elected officials, community activists, senior city staff, trailblazers, all of you. International Women's Day is always a chance to gather, to reflect, and to commit even more deeply to promoting women's rights, reproductive freedom, and gender equality. And given the uncertain and somewhat dark political moment we find ourselves in right now, we need spaces like this one now more than ever. I grew up, perhaps naively, with the idea that the march toward equity and human rights was a straight line, that as we move forward, more and more of us would get free, and that the big political questions of my childhood would be settled once and for all. My mom was a lawyer, so we grew up watching the Supreme Court like many of you watch senators in Ottawa charge games. We're big nerds, big nerds. I remember when the Chantal Daigle decision was released, reaffirming the rights of women to make their own reproductive decisions. I was a small child at the time. And as a young queer person, I cheered every time the courts gave gay and lesbian people more legal rights, from the ability to share pensions, to adopt children, and eventually to get married, which is something that my wife and I did 15 years ago. What I didn't anticipate was the tremendous backlash we would be facing in 2025. The rollback of reproductive rights, the demonization of diversity and anti-racism initiatives, the legislation banning healthcare for trans kids, as well as their ability to play on a sports team or use the bathroom. In my role as Ottawa's Council Liaison for Women, Gender Equity, and 2S LGBTQ+ affairs, my job is to reassure our community that the city's commitment to gender equity and to trans and queer rights is steadfast and rock solid. Thank you. I see my role as encouraging young women and gender diverse people to take up space, to speak loudly and authentically, and to participate in the life of our city. I tell them that imposter syndrome is socially constructed and that you should absolutely take on leadership roles and maybe even put your name on a ballot. Spaces like this one are especially important when times are tough and when many of us feel under attack. But so are the conversations we have over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, the texts of encouragement we send each other, and the time we spend with our families. Gay American writer Dan Savage said this about how we must find joy and community despite what we are facing. He writes, "During the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, we buried our friends in the morning. We protested in the afternoon, and we danced all night. The dance kept us in the fight because it was the dance that we were fighting for. It didn't look like we were gonna win then, and we did. It doesn't feel like we're gonna win now, but we could. Keep fighting, keep dancing." So happy International Women's Day, my friends. Keep fighting, keep dancing. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Ariel, and thank you to you and your team for all the terrific work that you're doing on the women and gender equity strategy. Thanks for your leadership and collaboration on that. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest this morning, Dr. Vera Etches. J'ai le plaisir maintenant de vous présenter notre invitée d'honneur, la Dr. Vera Etches. Dr. Etches, as you know, is in her first week serving as the new Chief Executive Officer of CHEO. And prior to that, as everybody in this room knows, she was the Medical Officer of Health for Ottawa Public Health. So many of us are still getting over the fact that she left the city of Ottawa to go work at CHEO. And I keep telling her, and it's still true today, it's not too late to change her mind. So of course, when she was our Medical Officer of Health, Vera earned the reputation for being an incredibly calm, steady, and determined force during the pandemic especially. And as scary as that time was for all of us, I know that our municipal leaders and residents felt they really, truly could rely on Dr. Etches and her incredible team for the best guidance, the most up-to-date information, the best advice to keep them and their loved ones safe and healthy. Alors, je suis fier du Dr. Etches qui nous a guidés dans cette crise de santé publique. I'm very proud of Dr. Etches and the amazing work that she did for leading us through that unprecedented public health crisis. But I'm just as proud of the many other programs that she helped lead while she was at Ottawa Public Health. I'm going to keep talking about her, and she's probably already regretting that she got up here so early. Nutrition and food security, maternal and infant health, mental health, substance use disorder and addiction, responding to natural disasters, vaccine campaigns, and so much more. And there truly was and it continues to be, an incredibly collaborative approach between Ottawa Public Health and the City of Ottawa team as well. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Vera Etches.
Bonjour.
Happy International Women's Day.
Merci.
And how's the new job? How's it going? Do you hate it already and wish you could come back to the city of Ottawa?
I think what stood out to me as I came in this morning and I was speaking with people was how many people watched a video on LinkedIn, which was
Very cool
about
video.
the culture of CHEO. The welcome that they gave me has been so warm that they are giving me. I'm still in the welcome days, but that video depicted so many of the different roles that there are at CHEO, whether it was Mohammed on the floor polisher or, working on the facilities, but the unique aspect at CHEO came through. I think that's why people loved it. The guitar, the clown, the music, that everyone's really focused on the children. It's clear.
Yeah, and then of course one of the most important roles is the CHEO bear, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you are the first woman to be the CEO of CHEO, and tell me, yeah. And, I'll be honest, in my career as a journalist, I've always had mixed feelings about asking these kinds of questions because in some respects, it's obviously important to note these major milestones and to say, you're the first person to do this, but at the same time, there's also something that's a little bit unfair about asking a question around that, because then it makes it just about that, or it makes, it maybe adds to the pressure, or, you have a right to do this job as yourself and not just as the first woman to do the job, if you know what I mean. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Don't worry, Mayor. I mean, it gives me an opportunity really to reflect that I am not the first woman to lead at CHEO. I think from the very early days, it was mothers that wanted better care for their children and youth in the community, right through till today. I want to recognize Dr. Lindy Sampson was the interim CEO, also a woman serving in that role. And really, whether it's the medical staff, the research staff, all the roles, engineers at the hospital, we see women are providing leadership on the senior team. Many of them are here today. But it did get me thinking about how things have changed over time. I was learning this week about the first woman who was French-Canadian to become a physician. That was back in 1900. She had to leave the country to be able to go to medical school. She had to advocate to have a private member's bill come before the Quebec Assembly to be able to come back and practice. And what did she do? She specialized in pediatrics. She opened the Children's Hospital in Montreal. Was a co-founder of that. So there's a long history of women contributing in our community. Elizabeth Briere opened the first hospital in Bytown. And I think that's part of what's been important to many women is advocating for children and youth. So it will continue. I'm really, it's a privilege to be able to do my part with the team.
Absolutely. And what excited you about taking on this role? Obviously, CHEO is such a valuable and highly valued institution in our city. I don't think there's any organization that has a better brand in our city than CHEO, and has more connection to the community. But what excited you about taking on this role and leaving all of us behind?
There's nothing about leaving you behind was exciting, and it's not my intention. I think collaboration is so important, so we will continue to work together. I guess from outside of CHEO, what struck me, what was one of the most exciting aspects is that they are working to be a really broad system of support for children and youth, health system. They meet children's needs in the community, not just in a hospital building, and they're partnering more and more to do that. And so to me, that was exciting to think about how do we create that spectrum of care so that children get what they need wherever they are, often closer to home, at the right time, in the right place. And now that I've come in just this week to CHEO, I've really been struck by the expertise that is there. And so this is exciting. There are people at CHEO doing things that are the first in the world. Sometimes just learning more yesterday about how artificial intelligence is being used to look through all of the electronic health records and identify children with rare diseases that may not be diagnosed yet. And the diagnosis rate using that kind of tool is really doubled. I think learning about the genetics and that testing that's happening, neurodevelopmental work that's going on, people are leading in so many areas. And so I think what I'm realizing is we need to extend this expertise. We need to continue to think about how does everyone in the community benefit from that expertise. We know we have wait lists for things. We're trying to think about that. But the people at CHEO are so committed and finding new ways to open up access. And so I'm really excited about that, thinking about the whole population of children and youth and how do we best support them in partnership.
I wanted to get into, and by the way, the point you make that I think is a really important one is people think of CHEO as a hospital, but it's so much more than that, and so many different things that you're doing that go well beyond just receiving people when there's an immediate need. But I wanted to go into your own background a little bit. Both your parents were doctors. And so what impact did that have on you growing up? And did you always think you would end up being a physician as well?
Yeah, I was thinking of from Dr. Irma Levesser, who wasn't allowed to study. My mom was, in medical school as a minority of women in her class. And now actually more medical students are women than not. So it's interesting to see the progress. But I'll give you a little glimpse of where I grew up. Was a small town on Gitxsan territory in northern British Columbia. And so my parents were part of the community. They really, I think, obviously they were doing medical work, looking after chainsaw injuries, doing appendectomies, catching babies, and that was important. We didn't always appreciate it when they were late for dinner, those kinds of things, but obviously very special work. But I do think partly what has stayed with me and I think been an example to me is that they saw so much of the other things in the community that can promote well-being. So my mom started a cooperative daycare so that other women could work. My dad was out there on weekends building hiking trails. And I think that's the kind of thing that fosters more well-being when you think it's not just healthcare. So I want to stay in touch about our recreational services and, the childcare services that happen at the city. They are so important. And so I wasn't sure about being a physician. When you're a teenager, you want to find your own way. But I think their example obviously was underneath and led me in that path. And I think also to public health in terms of thinking about the bigger picture and what can we do to prevent people from getting sick? What can we do to promote well-being in a broader way?
You've reflected already on how much things have changed even since the time your mother was going to medical school. What was your experience as a woman going through medical school, becoming a physician, your career trajectory? What as we discussed the obstacles on International Women's Day, what was your experience like?
Yeah, I think I was treated well. I don't feel that I faced additional barriers being a woman, but you could see others who were trying to have children at the time through school. Like the accommodations really weren't there to think about what do people need as students in their whole lives. I think for me, it was important to have women as mentors, and I was able to find them. But that is a really deliberate approach. I think that I've tried to carry on into the work I do at public health in the community. I think we know no one woman can speak for all women. We need a diversity of women in medicine, and so that's been really important also to shift to think about who else needs to be supported to be able to have the same kinds of career paths, and so something to pay attention to. It was women that their example pushed me into thinking about public health as a career. I hadn't really encountered that work until I was working as a medical student in Malawi after my second year, evaluating nutrition programs, and I came across the public health nurses who really were so embedded in their community and tackling big problems. It was a time of a lot of HIV/AIDS, and yet the women were making a difference. They were making sure people were growing their access to medication, and I thought these are the kind of people I want to work with, and so I think having those examples around you is so important.
Let's talk about your career in public health and your experiences. And obviously, I listed many of the things that you accomplished, but the one thing that will stand out from that experience was the pandemic. And one of the things that I find fascinating about public health is that it's not just about health, but it's about communications. It's about engagement with the community. There's some other dimensions to it that I find really interesting. So what lessons did you learn from that whole experience? What, in particular, the pandemic?
Well, I'm thinking back to the start of things and how there was so much uncertainty, so much concern and fear, and one of the bigger steps we took. I was visible doing it, but it was a whole team, was to speak out when we could tell in the data that it was very likely that we already had COVID virus here spreading. And so to me, that I'm keeping with me in terms of the need to share information, to use the data we have to make sure others can benefit from it, to be transparent when things need to be said. That is something that has stayed with me, and I'll continue. I think the other thing that really was so striking, and what, again, we need to pay attention to every day, is that not everyone has the same experience, that there are barriers, and women in particular, women who were newcomers in the Black population, really disproportionately shouldered a lot of the worst outcomes from the pandemic. So I think there's work to do. Certainly, I think about how in those terrible times when we were working to try to improve things with long-term care homes, thinking about controlling outbreaks, discovering that personal support workers who were key to that care were also living in shelters, so not paid a living wage. These are things that I guess motivate me to still now to think about who is facing the greatest barriers and how do we work together and partner to make sure that we're paying attention to give everyone the opportunity they deserve.
And can you talk a bit about the aspect of communications and messaging and engagement in health today? Because kind of a crazy time.
Sure.
And again, Councillor Troster referred to progress not happening in a straight line. I don't think many of us imagined that some of the fundamentals that, the new baselines that had been established in terms of research and science and facts about medicine, and that we would reach a point in this time where those would be challenged and where confidence in some of those basic facts would be eroded. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on all of that.
It's really important to counter misinformation, and both in Ottawa Public Health and at CHEO, we have specialists in communication. Engaging in the different environments is important. Knowing that people will take information in different ways. I think you can see the creativity and the humor of the public health team really helped people to pay attention. For me, again, I think it's important to have that transparency. I think that also ultimately no one channel is going to reach everyone, and I think that was something we saw in the pandemic. You really need to diversify and get right down to the community level where there are more trusted spokespeople for different communities to find the common ground. Sometimes starting with what's most important to people before they can hear what you have to say. And I think that's a strategy that we'll continue to use. The main things we see on media are not always positive, and yet there are so many people that are building relationships and countering some of that misinformation, whether it's at a clinical level, one-on-one, seeing patients, or in the broader messaging that's done across different media channels.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I reflect on is that the science and the data are never enough, right? And if they were, then nobody would be smoking anymore, right? So we tried to win the battle against smoking with a lot of information and data, and it didn't work. So we should know that that's not what's actually going to carry the day if we want people's behavior to change around health outcomes.
We have to look at the environment, absolutely. So what are the things that make a healthier behavior possible? And you use smoking as an example. When that's one of the pieces of stress relief that you have in your life, and everything else is a challenge, that's going to be harder to quit. And so really thinking about how do we create those environments where it's an easier choice. And there's a lot to do when we think about the kinds of health promoting things we're aiming for. Whether it's the food environment, I think these are things I'm thinking about as we come into CHEO, and I see that they have been making deliberate efforts to make sure their menu has healthy choices on it. Just if that wasn't done organizationally, then the children wouldn't have a choice. And so thinking about, as organizations, how do we do our part to make sure that that we're not just expecting behavior change with education, because you're right, it takes more than that.
Can you talk a little bit about your plans at CHEO? I know it's only day 5, but I'm sure you've thought about it in the weeks leading up to you starting the job. And more broadly, I think your approach is very much to be collaborative and working with the other hospitals, working with the city, working with other organizations in the community. What can we aspire to as a community when it comes to children's health?
I think one of the beautiful things about CHEO is that it's a team CHEO that crosses over the CHEO Foundation, the CHEO Research Institute, and the clinical care provided. And so I think being able to leverage the generosity that's in our community to be able to try new things, to innovate, to use research to evaluate and move forward, approaches that have a greater impact. That's something that I see is a real opportunity. And then, as you say, extending that into the community so that people have access to these experts, and thinking about also what else is needed. How do we think about who is coming through the door of CHEO, or the doors, and what else could prevent that from happening? What else needs to be present in the community? And as I said, sometimes it's going to be looking at the social services and the community-based supports that are needed as well.
And when you look ahead at CHEO specifically, what's in the plans there? I know there's quite a few things going on.
As people might not realize, we hear a lot about some of the other large building projects in the city, but CHEO is also building an integrated treatment center. It's very exciting because it's not just a building, it's about thinking about how service can be more integrated. So when children come with different behavioral needs or medical needs or mental health needs, that they don't have to line up in 3 different places, but that the team will be able to meet people's needs regardless of the specific diagnosis they might have, that the supports they need are the focus. So in a really integrated way, I think that's exciting. That's something that is in development that will be coming along.
So that project is underway now?
Yes, I think there'll be some kinds of announcements in the next
Okay.
month, but yes, absolutely well underway, and I think will be a chance again for partners and others to consider how do we use this to think about all of what children need in our communities.
So let's talk about International Women's Day a little bit, and what are some of your reflections as this day arrives? It's technically tomorrow, but we're having the breakfast today. But what do you think about when it comes to the place that women have in our society, the obstacles they continue to face, some of the challenges around having more women in leadership roles? What are some of your reflections?
Well, I really do appreciate what Councillor Troster was adding today, that we need to be very deliberate about recognizing that it takes significant attention to how women and gender diverse people are being given opportunities or are facing barriers. So I think being able to make sure that we are not just expecting that there will be improvement, but thinking about in our human resource policies, in our leadership development, in our access to mentoring, are we making sure that a diverse group of women also are able to participate? I think it can be hard when we listen to the news, and I think being able to lift up people that are showing a different way is really important. And so I appreciate that you are celebrating International Women's Day, that others are creating opportunities to see that there are many voices that are different from what we hear through some of the media channels. And I think those examples are inspiring and will be important to continue to bring together to counter some of what we're seeing. I'm really thankful that we have a community that comes together and it's visible for the boys that are growing up in our families. I think that's really important to have the support so that we understand everyone deserves to be treated as a full human and have the opportunity.
One of the times we were chatting as you were during the period when you had announced you were leaving and were going to CHEO, we had a brief conversation about your own health practices, and you said probably one of the only things you're not doing well is that you aren't getting enough sleep, and you worry too much about things, probably, right? So what keeps you up at night? What are you worried about?
I am worried about the children who are being left behind, that there are many people in our community who are really not having enough to meet their basic needs. And I think during the pandemic, we saw there was a lot of rallying and a lot of coming together to think about how do we address food insecurity, what else can we do, and I think paying attention to look at the policies and approaches that would make a difference for those children. It will last their lifetimes, but it certainly is the case that there are too many people that don't have what they need, and so I think that again is where we need to think about what can each organization contribute, what can donors and contribute, but what are the policy changes that we need. And so continuing to work with elected officials is really important at all levels.
And on the flip side, what are you optimistic about? What excites you about the future?
Well, I think when you can look back and you see what has made a difference, that there has been progress. We We know that we aren't in the same situation that we were in 1900, but that it is possible to make that change. It may not be a straight path, but that the voices of women are not going to be silenced. And I think more and more we're seeing that that there are people alongside women also who are recognizing that they need to be heard. And so this gives me hope. I think, as I said, the fact that there are people who are willing to say things are not good enough today and to use the data to push for more equality. This is the kind of thing that we know people will be able to make change.
You mentioned mentorship, and I think that's vitally important. And I know you've tried to pay it forward and pass it on and be a mentor to others. Is there a particular message you have for women and girls that you would want to share?
Yeah, I think that it's important for women and girls to understand that there are people who want to support their success and to look for those who are willing to be mentors, and also to be careful that there are practical realities that still can cause harm to women in the workplace. And so I think that looking to make sure that organizations are implementing human resource policies and have the places to turn to be able to say when things are not okay, that it's really important to support women and girls to be able to have those channels to address things when they're not getting the supports they need. And so I think for the women and girls coming up, to me, it would be important to instill that there are many opportunities. I think that what has been the case, in terms of career options, it's not as many closed doors, but to think about if there's something they want to pursue, who else can be with them, alongside them to help.
And how does the system need to change going forward because it's not just about creating equal opportunity. I think we have to be much more proactive than that.
That's right. So I think in terms of recruitment, we need to think about who is being left out of our of our approaches. I mentioned that we have more awareness that not all women are having opportunities, but why is that? To look as organizations about who isn't applying, who isn't being able to get into a leadership development program, and to think deliberately about then how do we reach out to more diverse communities. And I think that as an organization, these kinds of things are important to make sure that, again, it's that deliberate approach, that we're not just assuming that everyone will have the same opportunity.
So one of the biggest thing that I've admired about you, having watched you from a greater distance during the pandemic and then having worked with you since I got this job, is I think that one of the essential parts of leadership is to always be advocating for change and trying to change the world, but also the reality that you have to accept the circumstances that you're working in, right? So you, during the pandemic, you have to accept that what's going on and play the cards that you've been dealt. Another example would be when there are changes in provincial policy that affect the decisions that we're making as a city or at Ottawa Public Health around supervised consumption sites or things like that. you may not always agree with the policy changes, but you have to work within the system that the reality that you've been handed. So how do you strike that balance? Because I think that's what you've done throughout your career, at least from my vantage point. That's what you did during the pandemic, and what you continue to do. And I think it is the mark of a great leader.
Yeah, we need loud voices that say change needs to happen, and we need relationships that help people hear what needs to change. And so I think it is a balance. Sometimes we need to take the data and share, like, in a loud voice, this is not okay. And sometimes we need to take the time to build relationships, to describe to people what needs to change. And I think that, I guess, is trying to do both has really been how I approach things. Ultimately, if people know you and they can understand you have the best interests of the population in mind, that is a place of trust to build from and then speak about. So what does that mean then in terms of policy change?
Okay, and any final thoughts that you want to share on International Women's Day? Any other messages you want to leave with everyone?
Just how important it is to come together and appreciate that you created this space for us today, to encourage each other and to share the stories of what women are doing, because there are so many good things happening in our city, so many people building a better Ottawa, whether it's at the neighborhood level or in organizations. And so I think being able to share these stories, make them more visible, is one way to counter some of what we're seeing.
And is on that note, other than your mother, are there any other women that had an extraordinary impact on your life and career?
I think the beautiful thing is it continues, that it's always women there throughout my life as I am working in the work environment. People are teaching me, and I'm continuously learning from so many. Love to recognize people like Hindia Mohammed, who's helped me also understand broader community needs for newcomers, and Dr. Sarah Funnell, someone who I mentored in medical school and as a resident, who's now leading a work on Indigenous health as an associate dean at Queen's. We learn from each other as we go, and I'm just so thankful for the women in my life today as well.
Wonderful. So, thank you so much for doing this today, but more importantly, thank you for all of the amazing work you've done for our community, for the extraordinary impact you've had throughout your career, especially here in Ottawa. And we are all looking forward to continuing to work with you in your new role as part of Team Ottawa. We need to continue to collaborate. We need to continue to tackle all the challenges we're facing together, especially at this time. But I just want to say, you are such an incredible leader and person, and you've had such an extraordinary impact on our community. I think we are all grateful to you for your leadership and your mentorship and the example that you have set for everyone in our community. So thank you for everything you've done. Dr. Vera Etches. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today. So before we wrap up, I wanted to take a second to thank Rogers TV for live streaming our program today. And I want to let everyone know that today's event will be rebroadcast on Rogers on Cable 22 this afternoon at 2 and again at 6, and then again tomorrow on International Women's Day at 2 p.m. That's kind of what Rogers does, sharing it with the community as often as possible. And so if there's anybody who wasn't able to make it today that you know and you think they would benefit from hearing the wonderful words of wisdom from Dr. Etches, then please share that information with them. And in the meantime, I want to thank you all for your tremendous leadership in our community, for everything you do. Thank you for all the amazing work done by this fantastic group of people who are in the room today. Thank you for your commitment to our community. And happy International Women's Day. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.